Welcome to a look back at the Core 2 Quad series. Specifically today I have the Core 2 Quad Q9450. This is newer than the popular Q6600, therefore it has a newer architecture and it is considerably faster, especially in single core workloads. This was actually the first CPU I had for my gaming computer when I first got into PC gaming in high school. And it was really old when I first got it, and now it's double that age. It released in March of 2008 with 4 cores and 4 threads, running at 2.66 gigahertz with 12 megabytes of L2 cache. There were higher end Core 2 Quads at this time, but really all they added was more megahertz. So they were just slightly faster. And this one was cheap when I bought it years ago. And so that's why I have this one specifically. It was better than the Q6600, but it was still a lot cheaper than some really expensive ones. Today I have this Dell computer that it's in, so I can't do any overclocking. And it is paired with just 8 gigabytes of DDR2. So really slow, 800 megahertz RAM, and not a lot of capacity. As we'll see, that will probably be our main limiting factor, including the CPU. For the GPU, I have an RX 6800 XT, which is way overkill, but it alleviates the GPU bottleneck, so we're only looking at the CPU. Most of these results are 1080p low or medium settings with some other settings mixed in, sometimes higher textures. If we look here at just the CPU performance to start, we can look at Cinebench. Specifically R15, so pretty old version, but I've always liked this version because I'm familiar with the numbers. Our multi-core is 281 with a single core of 75. This is significantly lower than any modern CPUs, but it was a good step up above the older Core 2 Quads. I do not have those, but I remember them being about 60 something, maybe 66, best case scenario in single core. So this one's a good step up above those ones. There was also just a lot of games and programs that just would not launch. Windows was a little buggy, not necessarily too bad, but things just wouldn't install properly. So I couldn't get Epic Games or any games on there, so no Fortnite. There's a lot of things that just would not work. But here's some games I could get working, and we'll start off with Star Wars Battlefront 2, the 2018 or 2019 one. And surprisingly, we got an average of 45 FPS with a 1% low of 10 FPS in the Conquest mode. Now, that's not great, especially for a first-person shooter, but it's surprising, and I would argue slightly playable. Not great, not something I would want to give to someone or even be trying to do in 2025, but it worked. And it looked actually a lot better if we switch over to Heroes vs. Villains, where the average frame rate was 60 FPS and the 1% low was 16 FPS. Now, 16 is not great, but 60 is okay. A lot of times it's actually above 60, but you get a lot of people around, big explosion, we get some pretty big drops. But I would say in Heroes vs. Villains, so smaller maps, smaller enclosed spaces, it was actually quite playable. If we move on to Jedi Fallen Order, keeping the Star Wars theme going, the first Jedi game, slightly playable. There was moments where it was totally fine, but there was big stutters. This game has always had stutters, but with this CPU, they are extremely exaggerated. We got an average of 33 and a 1% low of 4 FPS, so there's where your stutters are coming from. But I would say with maybe a 30 FPS cap, this was usable with a realistic GPU. Probably still would prefer to probably get like the PS4 version or something like that, but this is dang usable in this game. Moving on to Need for Speed Heat, open world racing game that's fast paced. I would argue this one is unplayable. The average is 30 and the 1% low is 22, but it's not great. It just feels juddery, I guess. It's relatively smooth. It's like a relatively consistent frame rate, but not enough to make up for just being below 30 FPS a lot of the time. I was really pushing it in this next game. I tried Hogwarts Legacy. This came out in 2021, but to be fair, it was ported to the Switch 1, so it is very scalable. This did not work well, but it was remarkably consistent, just consistently below 30 FPS with an average of 27 and a 0.1% low, or 1% low, of 22. Not amazing, but the fact that it's working with a 2021 game that's this graphically demanding, I find very impressive. If we move on to a game that actually maybe is usable and actually even enjoyable, we move on to Forza Horizon 4. With an average of 46 and a 1% low of 10, this is a game that I could actually play. I ran a couple benchmarks, I was observing it, I was playing it, and I got all this data. And this game made me kind of forget I was testing because it wasn't so bad. This game runs at 30 FPS, I think, on Xbox One originally anyway. So if we could get to about that, I would argue this one was really surprising and it felt really good. The last game I could get running out of what I had today was Rise of the Tomb Raider. With an average of 40 FPS and a 1% low of 20, you would think it would be okay. Considering this is also a 2016 game, it's pretty old by this point. And even when it came out, 8 years old, right? It's not, the CPU is not ancient history. But I would say this one felt pretty bad. I would say maybe it was playable, but you got a lot of drops. A lot of things, whenever anything happened, just lots of drops. But the average was 40 FPS, and so this felt usable. So what do we think of the Core 2 Quad Q9450? I think I gave it an unfair chance here, and if you look at games 2015 or prior, indie games, really well optimized, simple games, just, having fun with your computer, holding on to computer parts just to remember what you were messing with back in the day. I think that's what this CPU does well, and it's honestly impressive that it even did as good as it did today, considering it is a 4-core, 4-thread with extremely low single core performance, extremely low clock speed. It is, what is that, 13 years old, something like that. It's impressive that it worked at all in most of these games I was able to, but like I said, it didn't work with a lot of games anyway. So I would not recommend buying this, but if you're a tinkerer and you just want to have fun, or if you already have it and you want to remember what it was like to game in 2008 to 2012, it's not a bad CPU by any means. It's just old and its time is over. But that's okay because technology keeps advancing. Thank you for watching this video. I'll talk to you guys all later.